Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When a quiet landowner is blocked from his own home by a power-hungry HOA president, a battle ignites that spirals into a war of forged documents, viral drones, courtroom drama, and poetic revenge. One man, one road, and a fight to take back what was his, no matter the cost. I bought my 60-acre property 8 years ago with the kind of certainty a man feels only a handful of times in his life. The mountains of Lassen rose behind it like a wall of old gods, and the forest road that wound through the pines toward my house felt like a private oath between me and the land. That road had existed long before Sierra Pines HOA ever sprouted its rows of 3-bedroom houses and ornamental mailboxes. My predecessor, a hard-headed logger with a fondness for paperwork, had secured a permanent easement back in the early 1970s, 72 to be exact, granting whoever owned my land unrestricted access through what would later become the HOA's domain. It was ironclad, stamped by the county, and treated by every previous HOA board with a kind of resigned acceptance. For 8 years, I kept my end of the unspoken bargain. I plowed the winter snows myself, patched potholes when spring melt chewed through the asphalt, and never once complained about the occasional neighborhood kid wandering too close for a look at my truck. I preferred to live quietly, tucked into my own world of timber, gravel, and construction projects scattered across the remote corners of Northern California. Folks in Sierra Pines mostly ignored me, and I returned the favor. It worked, until it didn't. The trouble began the day they elected Karen Higgs as president of the HOA. I didn't attend the election. I only heard about it from a neighbor who liked to gossip, the way some people like to breathe. "She's gonna whip this place into shape," he'd said, sounding far too excited for his own good. I hadn't cared then. What could a suburban association possibly have to do with me? The answer came a week later in a pristine envelope taped to the gate at the edge of their development, my usual entrance point. Inside was a letter written in the kind of officious tone that made me want to sandpaper the table it sat on. All non-member users of Sierra Pines roads must pay an annual community access fee of $1,800. Beneath it, in bold, failure to comply may result in restricted access. I laughed at the time. Not a good laugh, more the short, incredulous bark a man makes when someone tells him gravity no longer applies. I wrote back, attached a copy of the easement, my deed, and a curt reminder that rights granted in 1972 don't evaporate because someone with a power complex gets elected. Sent it certified mail. Return receipt requested. I expected annoyance, maybe a petty response. What I did not expect was silence followed by escalation. 3 days later, while driving back from a supply run with my father in the passenger seat, his health never great, but especially fragile that week, I turned onto the familiar road and felt my stomach drop. The entrance was blocked by a heavy steel gate that had not been there that morning. It stood tall and smug, painted black, flanked by 2 concrete footings and crowned with cameras that tracked movement like predatory birds. Next to it stood 2 security guards dressed in charcoal uniforms, each holding a tablet. I slowed the truck and rolled down my window. "Afternoon, fellas." "Gate malfunctioning?" One guard, a broad-shouldered guy with a shaved head and far too much enthusiasm, shook his head. "Access restricted to residents and registered guests. Code, please." I bit back a laugh. "I don't need a code. I have an easement. Been using this road longer than your tablets have existed." I pulled out my folder. Yes, I keep important documents in the truck. Life in the mountains encourages paranoia, and held out the easement copy. He glanced at it like I'd handed him a napkin with ketchup on it. "Those papers are outdated, sir." "Outdated?" I repeated, tasting the word as my father shifted beside me, confused. "That's a recorded easement." "Recorded means permanent." The second guard stepped forward, less confrontational but no more helpful. "Sir, we were instructed not to allow entry without a code. You'll need to turn around." My patience thinned like cheap veneer. "Call your supervisor." He tapped his earpiece, murmured something, then nodded as if confirming a dinner reservation. "Supervisor says you need to contact the HOA for permission." "Permission?" I echoed. "To drive home?" He didn't answer. Behind the truck, a line of cars began forming, residents returning from errands, watching me like I was an obstruction rather than a man being unlawfully blocked from his own property. Someone honked, a passive-aggressive chirp that grated on my nerves. I leaned out the window. My father needs to get home. I need to get home. Shaved head guard shrugged. You can access through the National Forest, sir. This entrance is closed to unauthorized traffic. The National Forest route was a primitive logging trail barely suitable for ATVs, let alone a heavy truck loaded with supplies. My father winced, understanding what that would mean for him. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. "Let me speak to Karen," I said. The guard smirked. "Ms. Hagues doesn't handle individual complaints in person. You can email the board." That was the moment something in me clicked from irritation to a cold, controlled anger, the kind that doesn't shout, the kind that calculates. But outwardly, I kept my voice level. "Fine. You want me to turn around? I'll turn around." I reversed painfully down the narrow road, every inch reminding me this wasn't an inconvenience. They were blocking the only lifeline to my land. Neighbors filmed on their phones as if I were a zoo exhibit. Someone called out, "Should have joined the HOA," and laughter followed me like gravel in a shoe. When I finally reached the intersection that led into the forest, my father sighed. "Son, this ain't right." "No," I said quietly. "It isn't." That night, after getting him home the long way, bumping over ruts, skidding through patches of mud thick as cake batter, the whole ordeal taking over an hour, I sat at my desk under the warm yellow glow of a single lamp. I placed the easement in front of me, read it again, slowly. Like scripture, Karen wanted a fight. She just didn't understand who she had picked one with. I picked up the phone, dialed the county clerk, and began what would become the longest, strangest, and most vindicating battle of my life. It didn't take me long to shift from disbelief to action. Within 2 hours of getting my father safely inside and medicated, he was still shaken from the bone-rattling detour, I was at my desk again, surrounded by legal pads, scanned documents, and the comforting sound of my old laser printer clunking through. Certified mail forms. The first thing I did was file an emergency injunction with the Lassen County Superior Court. I wasn't going to wait around for HOA board meetings or community memos. The court clerk confirmed that my easement was still on record, and my attorney, a sharp, caffeine-fueled woman named Cassandra May, told me bluntly, "They just broke state law. Multiple times. You're not asking for access. You're demanding enforcement." While Cassandra began prepping the complaint, I called the sheriff's department. A deputy came out the next morning, clipboard in hand, polite but cautious. He looked over the easement, checked the GPS coordinates, and nodded. "You have legal access," he confirmed. "But if they're physically blocking you, it gets complicated. It's a civil matter unless it becomes a public safety issue." I pointed toward the trail through the National Forest. "What do you call a disabled man being forced to travel 2 hours through unpaved terrain to get to his home?" The deputy pursed his lips, then wrote something in his notebook. "I'll log it. For now, document everything." That became the next phase of my campaign. Documentation. I launched a drone that same afternoon, flying it from above my property line to capture the entire roadblock from the sky. I recorded not just the gate, but the traffic it caused, the guards turning people away, the ambulance forced to reroute the following morning when it tried to reach my father after a medication complication. I posted the footage online with the caption, "When an HOA thinks it outranks the law." Within 24 hours, the video had 27,000 views and a flood of comments. Some were HOA truthers claiming I probably deserved it. Others, people who dealt with Karens of their own, offered solidarity and advice. One guy even messaged me the name of a retired judge who specialized in easement disputes. I sent him an email before finishing my coffee. I also filed a cease and desist letter, hand-delivered by courier to the Sierra Pines HOA office, along with copies of the original easement, maps, and a notarized affidavit from my father attesting to the medical hardship caused by the roadblock. I wasn't just fighting to drive home. I was building a war chest. And then the HOA doubled down. They began enforcing the blockade not just against me, but against anyone remotely associated with me. My contractor, who was supposed to deliver culvert pipe for a drainage project, was turned around. UPS started dumping packages at a grocery store 20 minutes away because their drivers were being cited for unauthorized entry. Even the garbage collection service called me to say they'd received notice from a community liaison stating my route was no longer viable. When I called the HOA's listed number, a robotic voice gave me a pleasant female recording. "All calls are currently being redirected. Please submit your inquiries through our website." That site, of course, required a homeowner login. I decided to try a more personal route. I showed up at the next HOA open board meeting held at the local elementary school gym. I wasn't a resident, but I was legally entitled to be there, as per the California Davis-Sterling Act. I brought copies of the easement and the sheriff's report in a neat leather folio. When I walked in, conversation stopped. Karen was already at the front, wearing a blazer like she was running for Congress, and flanked by two HOA board members who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. "I'm sorry, sir," Karen said, her voice dripping with false politeness. "This meeting is for residents only." "I have legal standing," I replied calmly, "and a copy of the California Civil Code if you need a refresher." A few attendees murmured. Karen's smile froze on her face. "You can speak during public comment." 3 minutes, she snapped, gesturing to a folding chair in the back. When my time came, I didn't yell. I didn't curse. I simply read from the easement, then detailed how blocking access had endangered my father's health and obstructed emergency services. I passed out maps, photographs, the video stills, and a notarized copy of the deed. Karen leaned forward and said, "Your father's condition is unfortunate, but emotional arguments don't override the will of a governed community." That was her phrasing, governed community, like she was president of a banana republic. After the meeting, as I walked to my truck, I caught sight of one of the security guards standing near the parking lot. He gave me a short nod. I recognized him. He was the quieter of the two from the gate, maybe 35, ex-military from the posture. "You the guy they kicked out last week?" he asked. "That's me." He hesitated, looked around, then said low, "You're not wrong. About the easement. We've all seen the documents. They told us not to let you through anyway. I asked too many questions. Got demoted 2 days later." I studied him. "You still working the gate?" "Not for long." He handed me a business card with a personal number scribbled on the back. "If you need a witness or a statement." I took it. "What's your name?" "Rob." We shook hands without another word. The war was on, and now I wasn't the only one willing to fight back. I knew Karen wasn't going to back down, but I'll admit I underestimated how low she'd go. About a week after the HOA meeting, Cassandra forwarded me a PDF with the subject line, "Sierra Pines HOA, counterclaim filing." Attached was a neat little package of legal nonsense dressed up in formal tone and speculative footnotes. They were suing me. The document claimed that my easement was antiquated and incompatible with the current community plan, as if the simple act of me driving home through their neighborhood was some kind of existential threat to suburban life. But they didn't stop there. They added language about danger to children, traffic congestion, and, bizarrely, loss of neighborhood tranquility. What really made me choke on my coffee was the section claiming that my property had been largely unused for several years, and that my access had therefore fallen into disuse and may be voided under principles of abandonment. Cassandra laughed out loud when she read that part. "So they're arguing you ghosted your own land and lost your road like it was a library card?" "Apparently," I muttered. "Next, they'll accuse me of squatting on my own damn porch." The counterclaim meant we were officially in a legal duel. My team prepared a response, hammering in the easement's perpetual nature, complete with updated maps, witness statements, and fresh drone footage showing me making regular deliveries and construction runs. We were ready. Meanwhile, HOA wasn't just litigating, they were escalating. I started getting reports that anyone associated with me was being blacklisted. My neighbor Mason, the only guy in Sierra Pines who didn't treat me like an invasive species, called me in a fury one morning. "Grayson, they won't let my daughter's birthday party happen at the clubhouse because we hosted a known violator." "What the hell is that?" UPS emailed me that all packages addressed to my home would now require special routing, and my contractor was fined $400 for unauthorized entry while attempting to drop off lumber. They actually ticketed the truck while it was parked on the road outside the gate. Then it got worse. An ambulance was delayed at the gate again, this time responding to a neighbor down the road from me. The guards had insisted on a code, and apparently the EMTs didn't have one. The patient, a 70-year-old man, ended up being stabilized just in time. But the fact that a gate, installed in part to keep me out, had nearly killed a longtime HOA resident, that didn't make headlines. Karen made sure of it. They doubled security at the entrance. I counted 4 guards one morning, walking in pairs with radios clipped to their hips, like they were guarding a compound. My friends stopped visiting. Cassandra's legal assistant got turned around during a delivery of case files and told that she was associating with a disruptive element. It was surreal. They'd gone from a passive-aggressive HOA to a suburban paramilitary cult in under a month. And then came the mail. A new notice arrived, this one on thick, glossy cardstock, the kind you'd expect to see on a wedding invitation. It informed me that, effective immediately, all unregistered vehicles entering Sierra Pines would be reported to law enforcement. It also stated that all delivery services, emergency vehicles, and public utility providers must now coordinate with the HOA's Community Safety Liaison. So they were going to regulate the fire department now? That was their next play? I took it straight to the sheriff's department. Deputy Lopez read it, then looked up at me with a face like she'd just smelled something rotten. "They're not authorized to do this," she said flatly. "This is obstruction. Are you going to enforce that?" She sighed. "We're watching, but until the court rules, it's still civil." Civil, my ass. A few days later, while reviewing dash cam footage from my last attempted delivery, I noticed something interesting. The more aggressive of the two original guards, shaved head, attitude like a failed Marine, was gone. Replaced by a younger guy, visibly tense, who clearly didn't want to be there. A new rotation. I didn't think much of it until I got a text. It was Rob, the original guard who'd given me his number, short and simple. Fired, NDA. Not signing it. I called him immediately. "Walked me out on Monday," he said. "Told me I violated the HOA's image policy for asking why we were blocking ambulances. You gonna fight it?" "Already filed," he replied. "Wrongful termination. Got a lawyer. They want me quiet. I want them exposed." That changed everything. If Rob filed a suit, his discovery process could open HOA internal communications, emails, memos, all the dirty laundry Karen didn't want sunlight on. We met in person at a diner off Route 89. He handed me a manila envelope. "I kept copies," he said, eyes scanning the room. "Printed schedules, internal memos. There's one from Karen personally instructing us to delay all unknown vehicles as long as possible, even emergency services." My fingers itched to open the file right there. "You sure about this?" "I'm not risking my pension over a suburban tyrant. Let's bring her down." I didn't say anything, just nodded. It was no longer about a road or a gate. This was a campaign of control. And now, I had an ally from inside the walls. If there's one thing growing up around contractors and county clerks taught me, it's this. When someone builds on land, they damn well better own it. And if they don't, someone else eventually will. It started as a half-joke. Cassandra and I were drinking burnt coffee in her office, poring over the HOA's counterclaim, when I muttered, "I wonder if they even legally own the road they're so desperate to gatekeep." She looked up from the stack of deposition notes like I'd just suggested robbing a bank. "Wait," she said, "that's not impossible." Within 48 hours, Cassandra's paralegal had dug up gold. Turns out the stretch of road with the gate, about a quarter mile of it, was not in fact owned by Sierra Pines HOA. It was leased from Lassen County under a 30-year easement agreement set to expire in, get this, 23 days. Even better, the HOA had missed their last 3 annual payments on the lease. The county had been mailing notices to an old P.O. box that apparently Karen had failed to update. Bureaucratic laziness meet tactical opportunity. We took this to the county land office in person. I watched as a clerk with a mullet and an attitude flipped through dusty records, squinted at the HOA's file, then said with a shrug, "Yeah, it's delinquent. That land's going to auction next month unless someone shows up with back pay and paperwork." "Does the HOA know this?" Cassandra asked. The clerk snorted. "Doubt it. No one's returned our letters in years." I tried to keep a straight face. "Can I see the auction schedule?" There it was in plain print. Public land auction, parcel 479D, paved access strip, minimum bid, $10,000, opens August 12th. In less than a month, I'd have a legal shot at buying the very ground beneath their stupid gate. Cassandra leaned in. "You understand if you win that parcel, the HOA would be trespassing just by using their own entrance?" "That's the idea." We filed the paperwork that afternoon. I kept the plan quiet. The last thing I wanted was for Karen to catch wind and suddenly pretend to care about paperwork. I didn't trust her to play fair, especially after what Rob had revealed. But as it turns out, I underestimated just how far she'd go to stop me. 10 days before the auction, the county assessor's office received a package from Sierra Pines HOA containing what they called a corrected lease renewal. It included a backdated check for 3 years of payments, a letter signed by Karen certifying continued interest in the property, and, get this, a copy of a lease extension agreement allegedly signed in 2021. Problem was, that extension didn't exist in any official record. The signature on it, clearly forged, sloppy even. The notary stamp, faded and mismatched to a licensed notary in Fresno who'd been dead for over a year. It was almost insulting. The clerk who processed the mail flagged the whole thing as suspicious and kicked it to legal review. That's when the bomb dropped. A handwriting expert hired by the county compared the signature to archived documents and concluded that it had a 96% probability of falsification. Suddenly, Karen wasn't just in violation of easement law. She was on the edge of felony fraud. I wasn't told immediately. This wasn't a soap opera where someone calls you with dramatic revelations at dinner. I found out when a county investigator showed up at my gate. "You Grayson Woodrow." I nodded. "Depends who's asking." He handed me a folder. "We're reviewing documents related to Parcel 479D. We've received reason to believe a forged lease was submitted. Do you have any contact with the Sierra Pines HOA?" I couldn't stop the grin. "You could say that." He took a statement. I showed him my original easement, my court filings, even Rob's memo where Karen explicitly instructed guards to delay emergency services. He barely blinked. "We're not investigating the guards," he said. "Yet. Right now, it's about who forged the county documents." I nodded slowly. "You might want to look at the HOA president's desk drawer." It became clear over the next few days that Karen's move had backfired spectacularly. The county declared the forged lease null and void. The backdated check was rejected, and the parcel was officially confirmed for public auction. No appeals, no extensions. I could feel the mood shift even from my corner of the woods. Homeowners in Sierra Pines started talking. Some called Cassandra anonymously, asking if their HOA dues were funding Karen's antics. One particularly furious resident left a voicemail saying, "If this gate gets us all sued, I swear to God, I'll tear it out with my tractor." Karen, for her part, went silent. No emails, no Facebook posts. The monthly HOA newsletter came out late, with only a gardening tip and a poorly worded reminder about community unity. And still, the gate stayed up, like a monument to hubris, guarding a road they no longer owned. The countdown had begun. 12 days to auction, 12 days to settle this once and for all. August 12th rolled in like a storm front. The county land office opened its doors at 9 a.m. sharp, but I was already parked outside by 7:30, sipping bad gas station coffee and watching the morning fog roll over the Lassen foothills like slow lava. Cassandra met me there half an hour later, folder in hand, boots on, hair tied back. She looked more like she was headed into battle than into a government building. Honestly, same. We weren't expecting much resistance. Karen and the HOA had gone silent ever since their little forgery stunt blew up in their faces. The county hadn't pressed criminal charges yet, but they'd declared the lease void, barred the back payment check, and confirmed the road parcel was on the block. We had our bid, the funds were wired, and barring some divine HOA miracle, the land beneath their precious gate was about to have a new owner. Inside the auction room, really just a converted community center gym, there were only 5 other bidders, none of them here for my strip of asphalt. Some were chasing empty lots up near the river. One guy wanted a parcel behind a defunct RV park, but not a single representative from Sierra Pines HOA showed up. "Think they're bluffing?" I asked Cassandra as the county clerk took roll call. She shook her head. "If they were going to fight, they'd have filed something yesterday. They're either broke, scared, or both." When the clerk finally called Parcel 479D, I stood up and placed my bid, $11,200. No one else raised a hand. Gavel down. Just like that, I owned the land their gate sat on. Cassandra turned to me. "You realize what this means?" I grinned. "Yeah, it means it's moving day." We didn't waste time. The very next morning, I loaded my truck with gear, bolt cutters, power tools, laminated signs, and, just for good measure, my dad, who insisted on being there for the show. We pulled up to the gate at noon. I could see 2 of the newer security guards standing off to the side, looking visibly nervous. They recognized me immediately. One started to say something, then paused when he saw the rolled-up deed in my hand. I stepped out and unrolled the county file like it was the Magna Carta. "Gentlemen," I said, This land no longer belongs to your employer. You're standing on private property, mine." They exchanged a glance. We weren't told anything." "Not surprised," I said. "That's kind of a theme around here, but you might want to call your supervisor. Let them know things are about to change." I walked straight to the control panel, where the gate's electronic keypad blinked with useless stubbornness. Cassandra plugged in a battery-powered grinder and handed it to me like a sword. It took less than 3 minutes to cut the gate's lockbox clean off. I yanked the doors apart with a satisfying screech of rusted metal, then unbolted the hinges from their concrete base. The whole thing slumped like a wounded beast. By the time I was mounting the new signpost into the earth, a small crowd had started to form. Half a dozen homeowners standing behind their picket fences, phones out, whispering. Some of them looked angry. A few looked relieved. I bolted the sign in place. It read, "Private access road trespassers will be prosecuted under Penal Code, Section 602, property owner Grayson Woodrow." For the first time in weeks, I heard actual silence on that road. No whining engines from HOA golf carts, no bored guards issuing veiled threats, just the breeze through the trees and my father chuckling softly in the passenger seat. I thought that might be the end of it. I was wrong. That afternoon, Karen emerged from her hidey hole like a wasp disturbed from a rotted log. She showed up at the gate in a beige Lexus, horn blaring like it was a battle cry. She slammed the car door, stilettos clicking across the pavement, sunglasses too large for her face. She marched right up to the sign, stared at it for a full 10 seconds, then turned to me with the fury of someone whose world just lost its axis. "You can't do this," she hissed. I smiled. "I already did. Want to see the deed? This road services an entire community. You've just stranded over 100 families." "No, Karen, I've given them access to the truth. You've been squatting on land you don't own, pretending you run a kingdom." She pointed a manicured nail at the new signage. "This is retaliation. It violates nothing. You tried to forge a lease. Remember that? County knows. There's a file with your name on it, and a very interesting forensic handwriting report." Her mouth opened, then closed. The crowd was still watching. One woman across the street dropped her gardening shears and just stared. "I'm calling the sheriff," Karen snapped, reaching for her phone. "Please do," I said. They already signed off on the transfer. In fact, I pointed to the cruiser idling at the corner. "They're here. Been watching since I started grinding bolts." The deputy stepped out and gave Karen a polite nod. "Ms. Higgs, Mr. Woodrow has every right to be here. We verified the title ourselves." She stood frozen, phone still in hand. Then she turned, got back in her car, and drove off so fast she clipped the curb. Later that day, I received a legal notice from her attorney demanding immediate restoration of community infrastructure and threatening to file an emergency injunction. Cassandra's response was exactly 4 words: "We await your filing." Spoiler, it never came. Karen disappeared for a couple of days after her driveway meltdown. Not a peep from the HOA website. No emergency emails. Not even a passive-aggressive flyer about neighborhood harmony. I figured she was either regrouping or lawyering up, or both. It was the latter. 4 days after I tore the gate out of the ground like a rotting tooth, Cassandra received a formal filing from Karen's attorney. They were attempting to sue me for what they called unauthorized interference with community infrastructure, malicious destruction of property, and, my personal favorite, emotional distress inflicted upon HOA members by signage language. They were trying to drag me back into court on the grounds that I had irreparably damaged the spirit of Sierra Pines. The legal argument was so thin it might as well have been printed on tissue paper. Cassandra didn't even blink. They have no standing. The land wasn't theirs. The gate wasn't theirs. And the emotional distress claim? Jesus. We responded within 48 hours with a motion to dismiss. Attached were the county deed transfer, maps, drone images, and a statement from the sheriff's department verifying the handoff. The judge assigned to the case, an older gentleman with zero patience for suburban theatrics, scheduled a preliminary hearing. On the morning of the hearing, the courtroom was packed. HOA members showed up in droves, many of them probably thinking Karen would deliver some kind of courtroom miracle. I sat at the defense table next to Cassandra, who wore her most polite murder face, flipping through our evidence binder like she was waiting for a child to explain how crayon got into the HVAC system. Karen strutted in wearing a navy blue suit, flanked by her attorney, a guy who looked like he got his law degree from a vending machine in Reno. He made a show of organizing papers, stacking highlighters, adjusting his tie. Then the judge came in, and all the theater vanished like air out of a balloon. The hearing lasted 21 minutes. The judge read through the HOA's filing, squinted, then removed his glasses with a sigh I felt in my bones. "Ms. Higgs," he said, "your organization attempted to submit forged documents to the county in order to maintain control over land it neither owned nor had a legal claim to." Karen opened her mouth. He held up a hand. "Don't interrupt me." He turned to Cassandra. "The defendant's documentation is thorough. His actions were within his rights as property owner. The court sees no legal basis for this complaint." He brought the gavel down. Motion to dismiss granted. Karen didn't even move at first. Her lawyer started to say something, then sat down halfway through a sentence. It was over, just like that. As we walked out, a group of HOA residents hovered near the entrance. One of them, a tall man with salt and pepper hair, stepped forward and muttered, "You just cost us everything." I shrugged. "I didn't cost you anything. Your board president tried to rewrite land law with a Sharpie and a fake notary stamp." Then came the ripple. 2 nights later, Sierra Pines HOA held a closed-door emergency meeting, but this time, someone leaked the minutes. Turns out Karen had never informed the rest of the board about the expired lease, the upcoming auction, or the forged renewal attempt. The corrected lease had been submitted without a vote. She'd acted alone and had used HOA funds to pay a private document service to create the forgery. Over $90,000 had been spent on legal defense and land management, most of it directed to a consulting company registered in the name of Karen's nephew, a 22-year-old part-time TikTok brand manager living in Sacramento. It didn't stop there. Rob Lassiter, former gate guard turned whistleblower, filed his lawsuit the same week. His claim included wrongful termination, coercion, and violation of California Labor Code section, which protects employees who refuse to participate in unlawful activity. But the real grenade in his filing was an audio recording, a 15-minute clip from his body mic the day after I was first turned away at the gate. In it, Karen could be heard telling the head of security, "I don't care if it's an ambulance, a sheriff, or the governor himself. If they're not on the list, they don't come in. Delay them, stall, make them call someone, whatever it takes." The clip hit the internet within hours. It made local news, then regional. A blog that tracked HOA horror stories picked it up and did a write-up titled "The Gate to Nowhere: How a California HOA Declared War on Its Own Road." Karen tried damage control, posted a video statement claiming the recording was out of context, that Rob was a disgruntled former contractor, and that she was merely protecting the safety of the children in Sierra Pines. That didn't fly. The sheriff's department reopened their file, the county board launched an internal review, and the HOA itself. They finally called a full community vote. The agenda: whether or not to dissolve the Sierra Pines HOA entirely. I wasn't part of that vote, didn't need to be, but I kept an eye on the results. The vote happened on a quiet Tuesday. No signs, no protests, just tired residents dropping paper ballots into a locked box overseen by a temp. The question was simple. Should the Sierra Pines HOA be dissolved? I didn't attend. I didn't have to. Rob texted me that night, 67-23. HOA dissolved. 3 days later, a locksmith rekeyed the office with a county observer present. Karen had already vanished. Rumor said she moved to a furnished apartment in Redding. No farewell, just silence and an empty parking space. But the lawsuits stayed alive. Rob's case moved fast. With the audio recording, the forged lease, and Karen's consulting invoices, the HOA collapsed. The insurance carrier bailed. Former board members turned on Karen, insisting they'd been misled. Rob settled for an undisclosed amount, but not before a brutal 4-hour deposition where Karen defended forging documents as efficiency. Then the county filed a civil complaint for submitting fraudulent paperwork. Felony forgery charges were expected. Her lawyer blamed delegated tasks, but no one believed it. Worse, Karen had siphoned over $120,000 in HOA reserve funds into a Sacramento shell company owned by her nephew. The IRS stepped in. None of the expenses over $5,000 had ever been voted on. She'd built her own private empire, assuming no one would read the fine print. We read it all. A month after the vote, the neighborhood changed. The clubhouse walls came down, the pool closed, some residents moved, others formed a simple neighborhood watch. No HOA, just people trying to rebuild trust. I finished fencing the road. Treated posts, gravel shoulder, clear signs, private access, Woodrow property only. The UPS driver finally made deliveries again. My father, recovering and no longer stuck on detours, stood beside me at sunset. "I still can't believe you bought their road," he said. "They built a gate," I told him. "I gave them a reason to regret it." Word spread. A landowner near Shasta Lake wrote asking if I'd consult on their HOA fight. I said maybe, if the coffee was good. Eventually, the sheriff issued a bulletin stating HOA checkpoints weren't legal barriers for emergency services. A small note, but it mattered. Sierra Pines didn't leave a legacy. It left a warning. 6 months later, the land was quiet again. Not silent, but peaceful. The kind of quiet that comes only when the barking stops, the threats dry up, and the last official envelope in your mailbox contains nothing but a property tax receipt. I'd just finished grading the new gravel path that connected my front road to the old Forest Service trail, not because I needed it anymore, but because it felt good, right, to have 2 open ways home. No more bottlenecks. No more waiting for someone else's permission to live my life. The fence posts along the newly secured entrance still looked crisp, the private road sign bolted with care, its metal catching the morning sun. I'd reworked the slope near the old gate, cleared the weeds, and planted native lupines and wild rye just to give the place a little dignity. The irony wasn't lost on me. Beautifying the spot where people once stood to block me from my own damn house, my father had recovered well. We installed a ramp by the front porch, and now he insisted on helping me with odd jobs around the land, despite my protests. He kept saying he was just supervising, though his version of supervision usually involved pointing with a wrench and correcting my hammer swing. He was there the day the final court ruling came through. Karen was found liable for financial misconduct, fraudulent misrepresentation, and violation of California civil codes regarding property access and HOA transparency. The judgment awarded me $370,000 in damages, a mix of lost time, legal costs, infrastructure damage, and emotional stress, especially regarding my father's medical risk. But what mattered more than the money was the language in the judge's opinion. This court recognizes the plaintiff's right to access and safety as not only protected under law, but fundamentally infringed upon in a manner both reckless and authoritarian. Karen, who once treated my driveway like a back alley shortcut through her fiefdom, was now forbidden from serving on any HOA board in the state. Her nephew's shell company was dissolved. The IRS slapped them both with audits, and from what I heard, her Lexus was repossessed last month. Poetic, really. People started coming by, neighbors, former HOA members, even folks from outside Sierra Pines, just to say something they'd never dared say before. Thank you. One guy, early 50s, balding, jeans tucked into cowboy boots, told me his wife had been fined $300 for painting her shutters the wrong shade of green. I didn't vote for her, he said. Hell, I wanted to, until she blocked that ambulance. Others just nodded at me in passing, a quiet respect. No HOA rules, no citations, just regular people mowing lawns and getting back to being neighbors instead of subjects. I found myself in town one weekend, loading up on supplies, when a young couple approached me outside the hardware store. They looked nervous, like they were about to ask me to babysit a bear. "Are you the guy from the road?" I nodded. "Depends which road." "The one with the HOA gate. You bought it, right?" "Sure did." They smiled. "We're looking at land nearby. Off-grid, heard about what you did, gave us some hope, honestly." I wished them luck, handed them the card for Cassandra's firm, and told them to read their deeds twice. That might be the biggest lesson of all. Most battles don't start with fists or fences. They start with ink, tucked into paragraphs no one bothers to read until it's too late. As for the road itself, it's still mine. But I made a deal with the county. I donated a strip wide enough for emergency access, under the condition that no future HOA, developer, or private party could ever gate it again. They filed it in the permanent records under an easement marked in bold red ink. Cassandra insisted. The gate's concrete footings are still there, cracked and lopsided, weeds pushing through like nature itself was sick of the bureaucracy. I left them as a reminder, a little monument to the madness. Because in the end, I didn't win just to prove a point. I won to make sure no one else had to fight this hard just to drive home. And now I drive that road every day with the windows down, one hand on the wheel, and not a damn gate in sight.